What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in today to the Thomas Tate Sports Podcast. We are about to wrap up the third edition of the day of 32 Picks in 32 Days. As you all well know, 32 Picks in 32 Days, I thought that was a cool name for the show, but it's technically not done in 32 days. It's done much faster than that. I put out 3 picks per episode, per day. Per episode, we'll say. Finished the top 3 last week, and we're about to finish 4, 5, and 6. We've already covered the Cleveland Browns, taking who I believe they will take 4th, and the Denver Broncos, and who I believe they could take 5th. So now we're moving on to the horseshoe team, the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts recently hired a brand new head coach, a guy that I'm very familiar with in terms of a name that Buffalo Bills fans should know, and if they don't, then they're not a Buffalo Bills fan. Former Buffalo Bills quarterback, longtime backup to Jim Kelly, great offensive coordinator, Frank Reich. And I was very happy for Frank Reich that he got that opportunity from the Colts. I feel like it's a great fit for him. It's where he started in his coaching career, with Bill Polian there, the former Bills GM, as the then Colts GM. He worked with Peyton Manning. He's worked with Carson Palmer. He's worked with Phillip Rivers. He's worked with Carson Wentz. And now he'll be working with Andrew Luck, which is very exciting for Andrew Luck. I think that's great news for Andrew Luck. And there hasn't been a lot of great news in terms of Andrew Luck lately, not even just in terms of his injuries, but his injuries have been terrible. But in terms of what the Colts have done to really help him, it's been very little. If you really look at the Colts roster, very little around him has been, established. And I always say that when a team has a quarterback with the talent of an Andrew Luck or a Dak Prescott or Carson Wentz, you look at what the Eagles did with Carson Wentz. Draft Carson Wentz, made the move to get him. Draft him. He's on the team. He's going to play. But they built around him. They brought in Alshon Jeffrey. They brought in LeGarrette Blount. They brought in Jay Ajayi. They made moves to make not only Carson Wentz better, but to make those players better. It's a team game. And obviously, the wide receiver position, I think, is a terrible position right now for the Colts. Really, outside of T.Y. Hilton, there's a lot there that's left to be desired. So the Colts did what any team should do in their situation. They looked at their team and said, we picked 3rd. 3rd is a great pick. We're happy to have the 3rd overall pick, but there's so many teams that have a need for a quarterback. Let's trade out of the pick, move down a few spots, not too far, and attain more picks, acquire more picks. And that's just what they did. They moved down from 3rd overall to 6th overall, which I thought was a brilliant move for them. They got 3 second-round draft picks. They'll have 3 second-round draft picks this year. They'll have 2 second-round draft picks next year. And I think that that's huge for the Colts. In the fact that they have so many needs offensively and defensively. Luckily for them, they have a great quarterback to lean on. And I think that, that's a good start. Thankfully, they don't need a quarterback. Luckily, luck was in their favor, and they were able to get Andrew Luck in 2012 coming off that Peyton Manning neck injury. If they didn't, get Luck, their team would be in some real trouble. So they probably wouldn't have traded down from 3rd to 6th. They might have ended up with a Jared Goff or a Carson Wentz maybe. But to say the least, the Colts need to get better. They are very much a mess right now. So 6th overall, I think if I'm picking 6th overall for the Indianapolis Colts, I'm looking at what I can do to make Andrew Luck better, taking the best player available, regardless of position. Obviously, it won't be a quarterback. According to this mock, Rosen, Darnold, and Mayfield are already gone. The Colts are not going to take a quarterback with this pick. And realistically, I think there's a lot of directions they could go. But the one direction that makes the most sense is you have a quarterback in Andrew Luck that is great. He's the future, but his career has kind of been cut short a little bit. I think his career has been fantastic, but I definitely used to think he could play 15 to 18 years, where realistically he might play 10 to 12 now. And that is due to the injuries that he's had. What is one way you can make sure that Andrew Luck, the juice is squeezed out of him? Every drop is squeezed out of him. What is one way you can kind of allow Andrew Luck's career to be prolonged? You got to get him some protection. You got to get him an offensive lineman that can protect him, that can be plugged into the offensive line, start right away, and be a stalwart on the offensive line for the next 10 to 12 years. The one guy that I believe is the best offensive lineman in this draft is Notre Dame guard Quentin Nelson. Now, I talked about him for the New York Giants at 2, but I think the plans for the Giants will change due to the fact that the Giants traded Jason Pierre-Paul and, and they have a hole there at defensive end. The Giants could easily go with Bradley Chubb, second overall, and I think that that's going to be the pick there. You know, originally the Colts probably would have been in line for a player like Bradley Chubb, but I think the right player will fall to them instead, and that is Quentin Nelson. I am a huge fan of his, and I know more about Quentin Nelson than almost any other prospect in this draft due to the fact that I'm a huge Notre Dame fan. And Quentin Nelson is not only not just a great guard, he might end up being one of the best guards in football early. And you look at what Notre Dame has done with offensive linemen these last few years, the offensive linemen that they have produced. Zach Martin comes to mind, Quentin Nelson, another offensive lineman in this draft, a tackle in this draft, Mike McGlinchey, who is the top tackle in this draft. So you have two great offensive linemen, two guys that protected DeShone Kizer, two guys that set up running lanes, two guys that are great in pass protection, two guys that can pull if you're doing a running back toss. You know, I think Quentin Nelson is that guy, and I think it would be a fantastic pick for the Colts. A little early for a guard, but a guard of this talent level. You watch him on tape, he is so powerful for a guard. And really, I see comparisons of him, and one guy that I'm familiar with just in my fandom of the Buffalo Bills is Richie Incognito. What makes Richie Incognito very good is that he can pull and set up a running lane for a running back. And Quentin Nelson can do that, and furthermore, Incognito can pass protect. I see similarities in Quentin Nelson and Richie Incognito. I think Nelson is actually far better, far more athletic. He's also far younger, but that might have something to do with that part. But I think Nelson is potentially... His potential is just as high as a guy like Saquon Barkley, just as high as a guy like Bradley Chubb, just as high as a guy like Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen. He's really, really high in terms of the potential, that he has. And I think the Colts moving on from third and moving down to 6 and getting this guard would allow them to cross off their number one needs list, which I think would have been a guard or offensive line help. And then they can look at maybe a wide receiver or a running back or someone, more pieces for Andrew Luck. That this is what, this team really needs right now. The Los Angeles Rams did the same thing with Jared Goff. They went out and they signed Robert Woods. They traded for Sammy Watkins. Watkins now in Kansas City, but you get the point. When you have a quarterback that you invest a high pick in, you have to build around him. That's what makes that player that much better and your investment that much more worthy. And the investment for Andrew Luck, I think, the expectations have been far exceeded in terms of the talent level that's around him. Andrew Luck has been able to still find success with the limited talent around him, and that just shows the greatness of Andrew Luck, that he's been able to be great with lackluster players around him, and he could be even just undeniably great, all-time great, if he has better pieces around him. And I think Quentin Nelson is that guy. Is it the sexiest pick? Is it the offensive skill position player? Is it the defensive skill position player? No, but it's a player that I think the Colts desperately need, and a player that definitely makes them far better. So, you look at what they can do in the second round this year and next year, and obviously they still have their first-round pick next year. I think that they're going to be much better. We're not major players in free agency, which kind of shocked me. I know their cap situation is not that great, but I thought they'd make a couple more moves than what they made. But really, they're going all in, trying to create a young team with a young quarterback and a coach that I have a lot of respect for. So I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the last edition of the day, 32 picks in 32 days. We've wrapped up the first 6 picks in the 2018 NFL Draft. Be back on next week to talk 7th, 8th, and 9th, Tampa Bay, Chicago, and San Francisco. Take care.